much, and it's wonderful to be here. I was worried about, it's always a stretch for me when I come down here and it looks like it's going to rain because, you know, how would I get her in and out without getting her wet because she's such a prima donna, you know. It's okay if I get wet, but not her, you know. So I'm delighted to see the sunshine, even though it's been a little warm. It sure is nice to see some new faces and some faces that I haven't seen for a very long time. Welcome to everybody, and I'm so glad that we could be together today. Today I want to talk to you about one of the things that I've never met anybody that said they had too much of, and that's happiness. And I would assume that everybody here is probably in sync with that, right? Anybody have too much happiness? No. Okay. So, H. Gordon Burroughs, in his book, Becoming a Spiritualist, talked about spiritualism being the religion of self-culture. And he spoke in that saying that we need to get past our things like negative impulses such as envy and bitterness and resentment and anger and so on. And me being analytical of nature, I like to take it back to the beginning and say, okay, well that sounds good, but why? Why do we really need to do that? Well, the reason we need to release some of these things and get past some of these things that are burdensome is precisely the reason why we need to get over them. Is because they do burden us. They stand in the way of our happiness. They stand in the way of, they serve as blocks to our spiritual progression. And just about the time when I think that I have a pretty good handle on the Declaration of Principles, I learned something new. And in that, there's a key to, in those Declaration of Principles, in the seventh principle, which is we make our own happiness or unhappiness as we obey or disobey nature's physical and spiritual laws, is a key to the understanding of what happiness is all about. So here we are in the physical body. How wonderful, having a human experience on the face of this earth, and in our process of learning, I think that we probably have things a little bit confused. Let me explain. So, if you go out and you buy a new dress, or you buy a new car, or you acquire something that you enjoy, that makes you happy, right? You feel good. But that's not really happiness. It's a spike. You feel happy for a little window of time, and then what happens? And then that fades, right? Because that new widget, whatever that widget was that you purchased, is not new anymore, and you've lost that spike, that charge. And where did that charge come from? Well, that's a brain function, and it goes along just like exercise does. You know, when you exercise, it releases those what they call those feel-good chemicals that your brain releases, which are things like dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin and endorphins, right? So So these are the things that make you feel good. So when you go out and you buy this widget or you acquire this widget, and you get that little spike, that's what's going on. Your brain is releasing those feel-good chemicals, and then they fade, right? So in our quest for happiness, we put two and two together in our infinite wisdom, and we say, well, geez, when I went out and I bought that new dress, I felt happy. So what happens? You go out and you buy another new dress, or you buy another new widget, and sure enough, there you go again. You're happy. And so we do this over and over and over again, and the reason why we do this is because we're seeking out that spike, that charge that the brain gives us when we perceive that that thing, whatever that thing is, made us happy. So we do it over and over and over again. You know, there's something wrong with this picture. Because this isn't happiness, this is an addiction. We're addicted to the charge that we're getting from that spike. Is everybody with me on this? Okay. So, people say, well, if I had a new house, I'd be happy. If I had a new car, I'd be happy. If I had more money. Money's a big one, right? If I had more money, I would be happy. I want to sidebar for a minute and tell you a true story about a woman that was a customer of mine. I used to work in the retail business years ago, and she was a customer of mine, and she hit the Ohio Powerball. And, you know, if you talk about a spike, those endorphins were going haywire, right? She was elated, and she went out and she bought a horse farm and set her kids up and bought all these horses and tack and trailers, and decided she wanted to go. Can you hold me a little bit? Excuse me. Decided she wanted to travel with her horses and go on these extended trail rides. And she said to her friends, come on, let's go. We'll go for 2 weeks. We'll go for a month. We'll go for 6 weeks. We'll go. I mean, Powerball was huge. And her friend said, I can't go. I've got to work. You know, I have obligations. I can't get away like that. And do you know that, and this woman kept, I managed a tack store, so I sold saddles and bridles and horse feed and that sort of thing. And she would come in the store all the time to feed her horses, right? I never saw anybody so unhappy, because all of her friends couldn't be with her, you know, couldn't keep up with that kind of a lifestyle. She didn't have anybody. She was lonesome. She was really sad and unhappy and miserable. So, all of this being said, what is happiness then? If it's not in stuff, if it's not in things, what is this element that we call happy? What does happy look like? Just so happens I'm going to tell you. Go figure, right? Happiness is not that spike, that charge that you get. Happiness is more peace, contentment, smoothness, calmness, a solidity within oneself. This is what happiness is. It's not a big high charge, and it doesn't have all those big lows either, right? It's a smoothness. It's a stability. That's what happiness is. it's not a destination. It's not something that in and of itself you can go out there and gain it as a standalone acquisition. Happiness is an evolvement that comes from the release of those negative traits that H. Gordon Burroughs was talking about and we're all familiar with, that we learn to let go of, we learn to get past within ourselves, and then happiness is the byproduct of that. So when you clear this stuff out of the way, what's left is happiness. So you can't view it as a standalone object, if you will, to be gained. You do it by peeling those layers of the onion, as we speak about so often here, peeling away those things that stand in our way from us becoming those whole, spiritual, enlightened beings that we are. And there's two things in that. There's two things I want to talk to you about today. Two big ones that probably each one of us at one time or another has experienced, and maybe some of us are still in the throes thereof. One of them is forgiveness, and the other one is letting go. Now I'm going to sound like a country western song. Anybody ever have anybody that's done you wrong? Yeah. I mean, we've all experienced things like disappointment and being hurt by the actions of someone else, be they intentional or not intentional. Anybody ever had that experience? Of course, all of us have, right? What happens is, when you perceive that someone has hurt you, and it may be very real, it may not just be a perception, it might be a global perception. In other words, anybody would feel that way. The pain that you feel from that is your own pain. It's yours. It's within you. That pain is inside of you. And what does that pain look like? It might look like anger. It might look like bitterness. It might look like resentment. And playing that tape over and over and over again. Let me tell you the story about how so-and-so did me wrong. You know, I did everything for my ex, and my ex left me, and blah, 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 blah. Right? Whatever the case may be. The more you fuel it, the more you stand in that space and talk about it, and pound on it, and pound on it, what you're doing is you're feeding it, right? And what happens when you feed something? It thrives, it grows. What happens when you don't feed something? You starve it, and it dies. So, forgiveness is not about letting somebody else off of the hook. Forgiveness is about letting yourself off the hook. That's why some people refer to forgiveness as a selfish act. To me, that's not really a solid explanation, right? Forgiveness doesn't mean that the other person did it right. that the other person didn't do the wrong thing, but their wrong thing is theirs. Right? The pain that you feel for harboring the resentment and the anger and the bitterness and whatever it is that you're harboring within you, the sadness belongs to you. So it behooves you to figure out a way to get past that. Because we're here not just to survive and get through this life. We're here to thrive, not just survive. So we have to get past it. Now, how do we get past it? By letting it go. Well, that's fine. How do you do that? That's huge. How do you let go? And what happens when you do? Well, let's say, for instance, we have we all have backpacks on, and in these backpacks they're filled with rocks, 20 pounds, 25 pounds of rocks. And here we are trudging along with these rocks in this backpack, and we're getting tired, and we're bent over, and we're sweating, and, well, we glow, you know, as women, but anyway. Here we are going along, trudging along with this doggone backpack full of rocks. And finally, one day we decide, that's the key word here, decide, we decide to let it go. So we slip our arms out of this backpack, let it fall on the ground, and walk off. And what do we feel now? We feel lighter. We feel like we can stand straight again.
So for many of you who are sensitive souls, the awakening does not and did not happen
good.
in your very early life.
I like that.
For many of you, you were only able to.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. We'll let it go. No worries, we'll let it go.
It was quick.
Right? You decide to let it go. Now here's the good news. The good news is decision making is nothing new to any of us. We make decisions all the time. You made a decision to get out of bed this morning. You made a decision to be here today. You made a decision to go to work. People say, well, I have to go to work. No, you don't have to go to work. But going to work is less painful than not going to work, because if you don't have any money, then you can't eat, right? So we human beings go to work. We say we have to go to work, but we really don't. We make a decision to go to work because the outcome of what would happen if we didn't go to work is more painful than what happens if we do go to work. Right? Now, not everybody hates their job. I mean, I loved what I did, and I'm very blessed to feel that way. So, you make a decision. We make thousands, literally thousands of decisions every day. We make so many decisions every day that we don't even recognize probably 90% of them or more as actual decisions that we make. You decided to get up this morning and brush your teeth. You decided to comb your hair. You know, but we do it so automatically that we don't realize that it's actually a decision that you're making. So decisions are not new to us. We know very well how to operate within the parameters of making decisions. And that's what letting go is about. You decide to let go. I'm not going to play this tape over and over and over and over in my mind any longer. I'm deciding that I don't want to hear that anymore. Now, if anybody tells you that you can make your mind go blank, you really can't. You know, let's meditate and make our minds go blank. Well, you can't. You need to fill that space with something. So you fill it with another thought, another way to, something that makes you, pleases you, makes you happy. You choose, you make a decision not to think about this, I'm going to think about that. Do you think that's possible? It's not a trick question. Yeah, you're right. Of course it is. Of course it is. Want to do a little experiment with me? Close your eyes for a minute. I want you to think about your forefinger on your left hand. Think about the fingernail. Visualize it. See it. Think about how long it is. Think about the texture of your finger. Now, I want you to think about your right toe. See your right toe in your mind's eye. Think about the nail. Think about the nail bed, the cuticle, the bottom of your toe. Okay. Take a breath and open your eyes. That's how easy it is to change direction. Did everybody see their finger? What happened when you thought about your right toe? Finger went away, right? You decided, you made a decision to change tracks. It's that simple. We love to confuse things. We love to make things very convoluted and challenging and difficult and complex. But the reality is, letting go is the practice of it is not easy, but it's that simple. It's that simple. Because most of the stuff, when you get to be where we are as adults, I was going to say around my age, but that wouldn't be fair to some of you. and maybe it would be a gift to others. I don't know. But anyway, the point is that most of our thinking at this point has kind of become habitual. You know, we're, as they say, creatures of habit. And we tend to think about the same things in the same way over and over and over again. And so, in the process of letting go of some of those things, those areas in your life, and we all know what we harbor within us, and we all have things within us that, or things we've done that maybe we're not real proud of at some point in time in our lives, or we're harboring some things within us that probably aren't serving us well. So, as adults, knowing that we're habitual thinkers, we need to challenge ourselves a little bit and decide. And this is, to me, this is exciting, you know, because we have a new project to work on, right? We decide to make a difference, to change. People do what is to their advantage, and people don't do what is not to their advantage. People do what is to their advantage, and they don't do what is not to their advantage. So yes, here we are in the physical world, in the human expression of life for, about this long, right? Compared to our eternal life elsewhere, in a different expression as energy beings, as light beings. Yes, we need to eat to survive. Yes, we need to have a roof over our head to survive. Part of the physical world is simply that simple. It's about surviving. We wear clothes because it's the right thing to do, but also they comfort us, right? You know, when it's cold outside, I don't want to be out there with a lack of clothing. And of course, in the summertime, we want less than we do in the wintertime, especially if we live up north. But these are all survival things. What I'm talking about is taking that next step and challenging yourself to thrive, not just survive. And when you're in that mode of, that hardcore mode of having a human experience and dealing with all of the physical aspects of life and not paying attention to the spiritual aspects of life, you're not in balance, my friends. You're out of balance. Likewise,